Hello, I'm John Boyd, Manager of Law Enforcement Relations for Utility. Utility is an innovative technology company that continually delivers groundbreaking digital systems for frontline professions that depend on speed, accuracy, easy to access data, and transparency in their work. I'm a retired sheriff from LaPorte County, Indiana, and spent 34 years in law enforcement. And I would like to thank you for joining us today for Space for Knowledge, where we're joined by Susan Smith, product manager from Utility Inc. Susan joins us today from the Peach State, the utility headquarters located in Decatur, Georgia. And I'd like to thank you for joining us today, Susan, as we discuss the best practices for ensuring the security and the integrity of digital evidence. Susan, thank you so much. And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks so much, John. I am thrilled to be here with you today and to discuss something I truly love, and that is software and the people that use it. I have been with Utility almost 2 years now, and I come from a software background and technology, and mainly from telecommunications and other software companies. So I am thrilled to be here to not only share my expertise, but to also reiterate my ability to really look at the client and what they need and be able to work to implement that into the software package that they have. So I am super excited to be here. Again, just great to be with you and to offer my insight.
That's great, Susan. And I'm really tickled that you're here today. We forged a really nice friendship since we both started at Utility. And you're one of those people that I truly, with every conversation that I have with you, I've actually learned something. Even in a casual conversation, you're one of many very, very bright minds at Utility, located in our headquarters in Decatur. And I'm honored that you're spending a little bit of time with us talking about something that's really important, especially in today's age, talking about digital evidence and talking about digital evidence with prosecutors and district attorneys as well. So you, I know, have talked to a lot of district attorneys, a lot of prosecutors. What are you finding that the key challenges are that they face in maintaining security and the integrity of that digital evidence?
First and foremost, a lot of prosecuting agencies find themselves receiving evidence in many, many ways, and that inconsistency and the sources that they receive them from really do impact how they can claim that they're secure and not tampered with. A lot of agencies are providing that evidence through thumb drives and CDs or DVDs and emailing, or even paper copies of some things. And by providing it that way, though it is providing evidence, there is an issue that starts to form with chain of custody upon receipt, as well as what happened with this digital evidence before they received it. And are there any data security risks that are brought in just from simple viruses and things like that from thumb drives or anything like that? So being able to provide that secure mechanism to receive data into a digital evidence management platform really does make a huge difference for the prosecution to enable them to feel comfortable with the data that they received for those cases.
Yeah, that's really quite amazing because of my 34 years in law enforcement. And recently I had a conversation with Chris Frank, who's Chief Deputy Prosecuting Attorney in St. Joseph County. And we talked about that in law enforcement, the defense bar often goes after the integrity of the officer or the integrity of the evidence. So evidence management is very important, but that's no different with courts, prosecutors as well, that they have that strict chain of custody and they're able to prove that chain of custody and that it hasn't been altered in any way and preserving it. So that's really important what you're talking about. So can you talk a little bit about the strict chain of custody for digital evidence and how it can be effectively maintained?
Sure. The platform that prosecution or DA or anyone in the justice side should be using should be one that does audit all activity centered around the digital evidence management or management of the files themselves, as well as the cases. And to take it even one step further, to monitor the user activity within the platform to ensure that processes are being followed, policies are being followed, and also to manage and make sure that the access to that particular information is held to those that only need access to it. So being able to provide even permissions-based access is huge. Additionally, being able to provide a log of that activity and have it as something that's easily reportable or easily accessible is very important. But by having a very robust chain or chain of custody for your evidence, it enables the prosecution to provide with confidence to the defense that all the evidence that was accessed or managed and analyzed within the platform that they're using has not been tampered with or has not been viewed by team members that had no business even looking at it. So a huge part of what they should be considering for a platform is the significance of that chain of custody and the amount of data that it can provide around that particular activity for both files and cases.
So with that being said, how do prosecutors ensure that digital evidence is properly authenticated before it's presented in court?
Right. So when folks are, or I say folks, when the prosecution is looking for a platform, they need to ensure that the platform does verification in the back end, that the file that was provided to them is properly matched up in the system, and there is no concern that there's any blips or issues with the file. Additionally, there needs to be considered just a whole security measure of access to that particular file, just access to the platform in general. We often at Utility encourage multi-factor authentication for user authentication to ensure that those accessing the system are truly those who are supposed to be accessing the system. And then within that, having a roles and permissions-based platform enables the prosecution to even further define who can do what and who can view what in the system. And then there's also the sharing mechanism from that platform that the prosecution is to use. There should be security measures around sharing information that ensures that the file is kept secure, that ensures that there's encrypted components around the file. So when they do share it, there's not going to be any issue with them accessing that, say, to a defense attorney for discovery. Then there's no issue with them accessing it because they're using a multi-factor authentication process to do that. But there's also verification of the file that it is truly the file that it's supposed to be that's being sent to them.
It sounds really complicated to an old police guy, but really there are real layers of safeguards that are in an effective digital evidence management system, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it should be that way, right? Because with digital evidence being so significant to cases these days, and it's only growing the amount of data that is accessible for potential evidence, there's got to be a way to maintain it securely and access it securely, and just to have that confidence that it's there when I need it, and there are no prying eyes that can see it that shouldn't have access to it.
Right, absolutely. And I hear that, especially in very sensitive cases, perhaps drug cases, drug investigators, that they're very worried that it may fall into the wrong hands, or a confidential informant may be discovered as a result of improper eyes on it, people that aren't authorized, and it can compromise the integrity of the case, but the safety of those informants as well. It's really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So with your conversations that you've had with prosecutors, district attorneys, what are some of the common pitfalls that you're hearing about that can compromise the integrity of the digital evidence? And then how is that avoided?
It's about receipt, right? The prosecution should be able to set the standard as to how information should be received. At Utility, that's one of the best practices that we propose to each and every one of our clients, is being able to set that standard so that you're receiving consistent evidence from each agency that's supported, no matter what agency that is, whether it's a utility using agency or whether it's an agency that's using a different collection system, body cameras and ICV, etc. there should be a standard of how that information is received. And with that, there should also be the ability to have some consistency in how they approach it with their own processes. Once they've received it, how did they receive it? Who did they get it from? And having a process and step process that they can use to be able to initiate moving forward with that case information. Some pitfalls that I see is every time there's a different practice of bringing in that digital evidence, depending upon the agency that's providing it or the public entity that's providing it, it creates a lot of burden or a lot of pressure on the prosecuting agency or organization to then take it and then make something with it. With a platform that enables you to have the standardized structure, it starts to set the standard and structure of being able to bring in evidence in a very understandable format and utilizing a format that's consistent across the board no matter what. And then some pitfalls is not being able to really know what's coming in. So the platform needs to be able to have some notification process for the prosecution to be able to tell them you have new evidence in, or you have a new case that's been provided to you through this organization or this public entity. So it can get really messy really quick because cases typically have thousands of files, depending on the critical nature of the case. It can be exorbitant in the amount of data that's provided. So being able to put forth some standard measures to be able to accommodate its intake and then manage it going forward from a case structure is very very important.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you had said something that kind of caught my ear where you talked about the receding of that digital evidence that comes through. And ironically, I was having a conversation with a prosecuting attorney last week who said, I'm frustrated with the defense continually saying that they didn't receive the files through discovery. And this proves an effective digital evidence management system can absolutely disprove that claim when it goes to court. Or law enforcement receding digital evidence that goes to the prosecutor claiming that they never saw it, or perhaps that they lost it. It's more difficult to lose digital evidence files than it would be voluminous physical evidence files, right?
Absolutely.
So what role does encryption and secure storage play in protecting digital evidence, and what are the best practices for implementing those measures?
So when we like to say when organizations are looking for a digital evidence management platform that is cloud-based, which Utilities is cloud-based, it needs to ensure that there is encryption of that data, both in transit and at rest. And what that means is that it needs to be able to be encrypted as it's offloaded into the cloud, into the DEMS platform, and it needs to stay encrypted as it sits there and waits for its usage. And it also needs to hide behind that security measures in the platform for access within the platform. And by having all of those measures in place, it heightens the assurance that the data is secure.
Right. So with that being said, that brings up an interesting point too, because I hear prosecutors and I hear law enforcement say it too, that they're somewhat leery of cloud storage because they hear these horror stories about how someone's personal information or their private pictures are somehow hacked from the cloud. But with encryption, that makes it more difficult for somebody to actually seize that and be able to open it and view it. But our cloud storage is very secure, isn't it? And talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So Utility has a partnership with AWS, and we take advantage of their GovCloud environment, which is CGIS compliant. And that only heightens the requirements to be secure in the data storage environment. So by having that compliancy, they're held to a little bit higher standard than just the average cloud storage environment. So say like a Dropbox or Google Cloud, just for the average consumer, they have additional layers of security that are met and additional layers of disaster recovery that's required to be able to claim and adhere to that CJIS compliancy. So by having that partnership and using that particular cloud environment to store our clients' data in, it helps us to be able to provide more assurance that it is of a more secure nature and of higher standard.
So in your experience, what steps do you think should be taken to ensure the transfer and the sharing of digital evidence between different parties and different jurisdictions?
Sure. So really it's about how does that happen, and can we create it's back to that whole standards perspective, right? How do we create that standard methodology? And by taking advantage of these platforms that offer these secure measures to be able to transfer information, share information, that reduces the risk for these prosecuting agencies to have to consider when they're bringing in data from another organization or when they're sharing it out to the Defense for Discovery or in another entity that they may need to share with. So working through that measure has been something that we have definitely focused on, to the point of being able to do cloud-to-cloud sharing through our platforms with other cloud systems and building secure APIs to push and pull information, or even through other tools that we use for bulk uploading into our platform for agencies or organizations that may not be ready to have such a digital bridge to be able to use for that data. And then using secure measures for that, for particular authentication, to ensure that A, the files stay intact and stay secure and encrypted, and then B, that only those authorized to access the data can access it.
It's really important. And you and I cannot have a conversation about technology, about digital evidence management systems without talking about AI, right? Let's talk a little bit about that. Like the AI that's offered in our Helios platform by Utility, how it assists in the secure editing, the redaction, the transcription of digital evidence. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, sure. So we believe that we need to ensure that the users have the most efficient way to do their job. And efficiency is dealt with for us through AI-driven tools for redaction, especially with the Helios platform. That includes ways to find particular objects, find faces, things like that, to enable that redaction capability to happen at a much faster rate than it would for an individual who might be going, second by second or quote unquote frame by frame, to look and to find a particular object or individual, etc. And then it's also about not necessarily just redacting out, it's also the capability of being able to highlight something of importance and doing that too. So these tools offer an easier route for those redaction technicians or those redaction experts at these organizations to be able to have a quicker methodology to do that. Because if you think about the number of files that may come through, and being able to start redaction jobs and have the system perform majority of the redaction for them, which includes, by the way, transcription, translation, things like that, is a huge step in them being able to have things court ready at a much faster pace than they would otherwise, or by using a third party to do that for them. So the
You
AI
find that
tools really do help.
they do. There's no question about that. What about the accuracy of AI-driven tools?
So again, AI is AI, right? It's not a
Mhm.
human.
Right.
But we look at it not necessarily as providing things as 100% court ready, but using the efficiency mechanisms that they bring to bring you 80% of the way there, so that your job as the redaction person or the person that's reviewing and preparing things for court gets done significantly faster. For us, it's about the efficiency of it, and then being able to associate that with reduction in costs and resource time that's allotted for each of these files to be prepared for court. So again, it just depends on the amount of work that needs to be done from a redaction or transcription perspective, but it really does make a huge difference. And then being able to do multiple things at once and not waiting for one thing to finish at a time before you can go on to the next creates a huge efficiency measure for those that are participating in that data analysis portion.
You said some really key words there, efficiency, eases workflows, and cost efficient as well. And again, as a guy that was in law enforcement for 34 years, I took for granted what our prosecutors had done. But it wasn't until recently when I started having in-depth conversation with prosecuting attorneys and district attorneys that they too, like law enforcement, are suffering from a workforce issue, manpower issue. And any way that they can ease their workflows while keeping costs down, being more efficient, are really important for them. And I think our Helios platform resolves a number of those concerns and takes care of those issues for them.
Absolutely, absolutely. We've had instances where clients have been able to significantly reduce their case backlog in a short amount of time. And also what used to take say 10 resources before, they've been able to back down to 4 because they are using the tools and the mechanisms provided in our Helios platform.
So in your experience, your expertise, what are the best practices for downloading and auditing digital evidence and the handling procedures?
Sure. So when something is provided from the prosecution to the defense, there are a few ways for these particular clients to handle that. They could provide these defense attorneys access to the platform, or they could use a secure share method from the platform. Helios offers both capabilities. When you're talking about providing access into the platform, there are benefits to that. And then there are some cost measures associated with that too, right? Because the more users you have on a platform, you tend to incur more cost, especially for data storage or access, etc. But then being able to grab chain of custody around that and allowing them access to that platform is huge, so that you know when they accessed, what they accessed, did they do were they given permission to do something to it, or did they share it out if given the permission, etc. That whole chain of custody audit provides that information. Now, if you were to use a secure share method, which is still a completely acceptable method, this provides the outside recipient or the external recipient the ability to still receive those case files, but then they have to download them. The beautiful thing about Helios is that it will grab, from a chain of custody standpoint, it will grab all of the activity, including when it was shared, who it was shared to, and then it will also grab when the files were downloaded. So it takes it all the way to the download from a chain of custody standpoint. And that's super helpful because everyone's busy, everybody's going and doing a lot of things. And sometimes we miss emails and notifications and things like that. So if the defense claims that they did not receive it or it hasn't come across, it's very easy to go back and look at the chain of custody log and say, it was sent at this time to this individual. So it gives them a starting point to go and look for the link that they can go and grab the information. So it's super helpful just in general, or, just to remind them that, yes, it was sent, but we'll send it again, kind of
Sure.
thing.
One of the things that I also learned in talking with prosecutors was the unintended consequence of the advent of digital evidence management systems and the training, the resources that's needed, because again, with manpower issues and budget constraints, training is time consuming and it can be very expensive as well. So, what's your thoughts on training when it comes to digital evidence management systems for staff?
Sure. I'm personally a proponent of at least initially having in-person training, and even if it's just to quote unquote train the trainer, so to speak, so that you have experts when the system is implemented, you have experts on site that can help new users through issues of becoming more proficient with the platform. It's also very important for a platform to have significant help information. And it's not just about, help content. It's also being able to display what it looks like to perform some task or what have you, or be able to access something and having it show you. So our platform, I'm going to be selfish here and talk about our platform. Our platform, we provide both. We provide in-person training to ensure that the prosecution understands and is comfortable using, and all of the roles involved that are assigned are comfortable doing what they need to do. And that is an on-site training with a training expert that is part of the utility staff. And then, of course, there's ongoing support to be able to assist. We have 24/7 support that can help with that as well. But we also have a very robust help section that's included in our platform that even has a tutorial that goes through where everything is in the platform. So when you do onboard new staff members, it helps get them started even before they may initiate their actual training. But it's very important. Digital evidence management systems, they can get pretty in depth with what they can do. And a lot of significant feature set means a lot more time in the system learning how to do it. So we want to make sure that our clients are extremely comfortable even before we leave that initial on-site training, so that they can hit the ground running.
I think the in-person training, not something that's canned or taped or prepared on kind of a general basis, is a key differentiator. I think there's nothing better than in-person training. So there's that feedback. And if somebody has a question or they don't quite get something, they don't get lost. So we've discussed a lot of technical terms today, and we're kind of winding down a little bit. I'd kind of like to go back, circle back around and talk about some of our differentiators, or the difference that a digital evidence management system can provide for a district attorney or prosecutors, because I know there are a lot of prosecutors that are still out there that are still receiving voluminous amounts of evidence by way of thumb drives, CDRs, paper, and there are also a number of prosecutors that I've talked to that are on a state-based system that doesn't necessarily fit their needs. And many of the prosecutors confide that it actually creates more work for them and it's not user-friendly. So we agree that it can, an effective digital evidence management system, specifically our Helios platform, can ease workflows, it can save money. But let's talk about some of the other differentiators as well.
Sure. I think it's really important to think about how our system works. We are data source agnostic. And what that means is we don't care where the data comes from. It can come from a utility-based collection device or platform, or it doesn't have to. So we are open to receiving whatever it is, and we are happy to ingest, whether it be from a cloud-to-cloud connection or using a bulk file upload tool to do so. It doesn't matter. And I think that is an important aspect of our particular platform that makes us different. And we built it that way because of that special need. We know that there are going to be law enforcement agencies or public entities that have access and use different systems, but they still need to provide that information to the prosecution as needed. And being able to find a very data agnostic way to do that was part of the nuts and bolts of us building the system.
That's really important. And Susan, I can't tell you how honored I am that you joined us today and provided us with your expertise, your knowledge, your experience, and your brilliant mind. So thank you so much for being with us today. I really enjoyed our discussion, and I look forward to future discussions as well on a really important topic in today's society. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.